Back in 2019, Mike Bloomberg was speaking at an event, and when he does that, bad things happen for him. In this case, references that he made in a particularly callous fashion to two people who had overdosed on drugs. Here he is.
72,000 Americans died in 2017 from overdoses. A New York Post or Daily News had a picture on the front page of a father and a son. They both OD'd at the same party. I mean, it's not a good family. It's craziness.
Yeah, it's craziness. The reference to the fact that many people in New York die of overdoses, it's great for a mayor or a former mayor to talk about, joking that because these two had died on the same day, not this is a tragedy that we should empathize with the survivors and their family, but that they're a bad family because there is still that family. The younger of the two had died. It was a father and a son. Jasmine Santos was the wife of the younger that had died, and Carlos Andrade, the younger of the two that died, he had an 11-month-old and 4-year-old sons that remained. And imagine hearing that the former mayor of your town is mocking your family as being bad after two people died.
Well, later in that clip, he talks about how we shouldn't legalize marijuana because it's an addictive drug as well, something that's completely out of whack with the country. 70% of Americans think we should legalize marijuana, and it's way higher with the Democratic voters as well. So yet another issue where a Republican is out of step with the voters that he's trying to win over in a Democratic primary. But this speaks to the overall problem with Mike Bloomberg, of which there are many. He's a paternalist. He's an old school conservative in many, or an old school paternalist in many ways. He's a conservative as well, but he wants to rule over people, and that's what he did, kind of did with his soda ban. That's what he did with violating constitutional rights with stop and frisk. He thinks he knows what's best for people, and he thinks that if you're a drug addict, you're fundamentally a bad person. And so that's why he wants marijuana not to be illegal, because it's a bad illicit thing. And he is an elitist who looks down upon people without any understanding of why people are turning to drugs and the horrors of addiction as a mental health crisis.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't even call it that. Mocking was used, joking is used. No, he's been completely serious. This is how, again, you said how he likes to look down on people, but that's how you have this feeling of, I mean, him even jumping in this race right now. We talk about how pompous it is and thinking you can actually do this and it would work out for you. It's because his entire life he's seen himself as being above these other folks because of what he's got and what he's built and his companies and all that stuff. So because of that, he's like, oh, I mean, they're just a bad family. Which also, by the way, is very reminiscent. Sounds a little bit like Donald Trump when he likes to talk about certain people's families. That family's not a good family, but my family is this kind of family. It's this hierarchy of positioning in your family life. Like, so everyone else in that family is garbage. There's not a good family somehow because these two related men both overdosed at the same party, because no other people's families, no rich people's families have drug addicts. No other people's rich families have been affected by it with death from drugs. No, this doesn't happen. So he's retelling the real story, which allow us to continue to think that only those poor, dirty people die of drug overdoses or even become addicted to it. There was a doc I watched before about the spread of opioids, and many times in states like West Virginia, those blue-collar working towns, when people are overworked and they end up injured and hurt, and they go to the doctor and they give them these kind of medications, that leads to these kinds of drug addictions. Because they're bad people? I thought we praised the coal miners. They're the grit of America, the Midwest, the heart of America. They work their butts off to get to create what we've got in this country. Those are the people that are addicted to these drugs because they've been overworked, and then our healthcare system just throws them some pills and they get addicted to them. No. And that's one aspect of it. But but we don't have. He's not going to talk about that part because we need to use them.
They're bad people, but his buddies, Jeffrey Epstein.
Because he did no drugs.
Harvey Weinstein, they're right, exactly.
Those parties were dry events.
Obviously, yeah.
No illicit substances. Just to skip ahead briefly, I want to just mention this is a first pass in some of what he's previously said about marijuana as well, because as Em alluded to, he goes on to talk about marijuana in the clip. He was asked about medical marijuana at the time. This is back in 2013. He says, "Medical my foot. There's no medical. This is one of the great hoaxes of all time." Asked about potentially legalizing or decriminalizing marijuana, he said, Drug dealers have families to feed. If they can't sell marijuana, they'll sell something else, and the something else will be something worse.
Medical My Foot sounds like a band name. It's pretty good.
Exactly.
Again, I'm sorry. So drug dealers have families, they need to feed them, so they're gonna start selling things that are worse than marijuana. Again, so
make it an industry.
Yeah,
make it legal.
There's an industry of that bad stuff already, as I alluded to a minute ago. So that people end up on opioids because of the prescription pain medications that they get prescribed by who? A drug dealer on the street who has an RX card. He's like, hey, so come to the corner because I'm a doctor with a jacket on, and then I'm gonna prescribe you some drugs. That's not where it starts.
Yeah.
So but we exclude that part.
Yeah. He said those things. Now bear in mind, back in 2002, he responded to a question of whether he had ever tried marijuana by saying, "You bet I did, and I enjoyed it." So here's the thing. So in 2002, he admitted that he had done it. He went on to say that he's a believer that we should enforce the laws, and I don't think that decriminalizing marijuana is a good idea. And certainly not from his point of view a necessary idea, because of his wealth and privilege, he'll be able to try it and there will never be any consequences. Anyone around him, relatives, friends, all that, they can do whatever. Marijuana, that's the bottom floor of what they can do and never have to worry about police. But it also makes me remember the tape that Benjamin Dixon found of him talking about the Xeroxing and he talks about all that. He says, well, so if black and brown people get caught with marijuana, that's only because that's where the cops are, because that's where the crime is. And so what are you gonna do? But like, you said that knowing that you've done marijuana. You know that you enjoyed it. It wasn't a terrible thing. It didn't ruin your life. It didn't set you on some sort of downward spiral. It was just marijuana. And yet when you had more than a decade to do something about making sure that everyone else suffered no more consequences than you did for doing that substance, you didn't do anything. Because he didn't care, because people like you are already doing just fine under the status quo. And he says now, by the way, now he says he's in favor of decriminalization. Woo, bold stance. But is he? Or is it just convenient to say that during election when this is a guy who has done it and demonized it for decades throughout his life?
And when your illegal activities don't come back to haunt you, you don't see them as illegal anymore. You're like, yeah, I mean, I did it, but nobody bothers me about it. Like, it's an internal, you start to develop a thought process that, yeah, that's not illegal for me. You won't say that out loud, but you think, yeah, I mean, I'm like Bloomberg. My families are Bloombergs, calm down. Yeah, I smoked it and it's fine. But if someone else did, they're on a downward spiral. I know we're not gonna get to the video, but he talked about how it changes are we gonna get to it? How it changes your IQ, it's gonna destroy the workforce. Companies are going down because they can't have a good, rich environment to hire people from. So that's where it comes back to. Oh, I'm gonna have a bunch of dummy potheads working for me, and that's what I don't want. That's his problem.
And by the way, we should note that it doesn't lower your IQ. So he thinks that he has dumb workers because they get high when they're not working. It's nonsense, not found in any science, but that's what he thinks as a business owner himself.
What do he thinks about people who get drunk on weekends and then come back to work on Monday? Because there are studies about what alcohol does to you.
Forget the weekend, he's on Wall Street. What about the people that go off and have their martini power lunches? I'm sure that raises IQ. It sure does when I'm drinking. Anyway, so that's some of what we've discovered about Bloomberg today. I have a feeling we might get more before tomorrow's debate. Hopefully Warren and Bernie's debate prep teams are keeping track of the news.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, Jayar. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.